Rise of the Ronin is without a doubt derivative of a lot of other games, but so is almost every other new game. This game is not Sekiro, it's not Ghost of Tsushima, and it certainly is not Dark Souls. It takes inspiration from them, but is its own journey. So unlike everyone else, I am not going to compare Rise of the Ronin to any of them from this point on. If you're someone who will only play the cream of the crop, then maybe this game isn't for you. But for the rest of us, I think this game is unfairly getting forgotten about because of its terrible release window, its PlayStation exclusivity, and the giant elephant in the room, its dated graphics. Wait, elephants are already kinda giant, isn't that the point? Anyways, I think that's where I'd like to start my review. Rise of the Ronin got a large amount of flack for its antiquated visuals before release, and it has not helped it move units, especially when released on the same day as Dragon's Dogma 2. I need to say that despite its low quality textures, it still can be quite beautiful and looks decent in many situations. I frequently repeat that I believe art direction is far more important than visual fidelity, but I do think Rise of the Ronin is pushing that mantra to its fullest extent. At this point, I do think it is starting to look exceptionally dated, especially with all the amazing looking games that have been coming out. It does however seem to have a nice stable frame rate though, which is more than I can say for the aforementioned Dragon's Dogma 2, which is stuck at 30 FPS or lower on console. All that aside, there are some genuinely beautiful parts of the map. I especially like the mix between Japanese and European architecture that helps sell the story and the time period. It's a part of Japan's history that is new to me, and I really enjoyed seeing the clashing cultures perfectly exemplified by the buildings themselves. The parts that really let it down are the abnormally bad quality ground textures, which are repetitive and extremely flat looking, with very little detail that stand out even amongst the other dated textures. In all honesty, it really did not affect my enjoyment of the game on a gameplay front, as the quality is high enough to see what's going on and engage fully with the combat and other systems of Rise of Ronin. Where it did interfere is with the already mediocre story, but we will get to that later, but that's enough of that. Let's get on to something more positive. The combat system in Rise of Ronin is robust, fun, and a challenging system that makes up the bulk of the gameplay, and I am not complaining, as it is really a great romp from beginning to end. The combat evolves as the game opens up with plenty of different weapon types, combat styles, and special attacks to mix it up. Combat is a mix of dodging, blocking, parrying, and attacking while mixing in special martial skills of your own while whittling down the health bars of your enemies. Enemies have a stamina bar that you can take down slowly with parries and your own attacks. Every attack reduces their stamina, and also takes a bit off the maximum amount of stamina they can regen. Once you reduce the stamina bar down to 0, you can perform a high damage attack taking a decent chunk of their health bar. You too have a stamina bar, and you need to keep an eye on it, something I'm particularly bad at, because if you don't, you're going to take a lot of damage. Combat feels great, even if I never got very good at it. I still managed to beat the game on the hardest difficulty, even with it constantly asking me if I wanted to switch difficulties, which, to be honest, is a little bit insulting. The boss battles are a huge part of these types of games, and in Rise of Ronin, it's all about slowly learning the timings of their attacks and which ones you should dodge rather than trying to parry everything, because I am simply too boomer to react to some of these attacks with a parry, so best to try dodge instead. I enjoy the combat a great deal, which is lucky, because it's 90% of what you'll be doing in this game. That's not a bad thing either, because all the encounters are different enough from each other despite all the enemies being animals, humans, or sometimes very large humans. The systems you interact with to accomplish your combat are also interesting. Each weapon has 2 martial skills, which are abilities unique to the weapons and the combat style that you are using with that weapon. They do different things, so make sure you try them all out in advance so you know what they do and how best to use them. I must admit, I didn't delve too deep into the combat styles of the game. Basically, there are different movesets for different weapon types, so every weapon has different styles which switch up your attacks and martial skills. They can also be leveled up simply by using them, and new ones can also be gained. Each combat style is effective against different enemies, so you'll have to switch on the fly when switching to a new enemy. Shown next to an enemy's health bar is a little arrow that is either red, which means less effective, white, which means neither more or less effective, and blue, which means your currently selected combat style is more effective versus this enemy. As I said, I didn't really engage with this much at all, and the later weapons that I got came with 3 styles selected, and I just left them as they were. A quick mention to the stealth system, which is primitive but useful enough. It could have been nice to have a bit of a deeper system, but honestly, it served its purpose fine enough. I do like that you can yank fools up into a roof and assassinate them, meaning you can stay up high while hunting more prey. Also, you can assassinate from your glider, which is a lot of fun, and I use this to great effect often. I have a few complaints. Many missions can be completed with companions, which you can switch between. I didn't really want to switch, I just wanted to play as my character, but because of this, it sometimes felt like my companions were set dressing, and during boss fights would be glorified healers to pick me back up when I fell. Sometimes they would just stand around and watch me get my ass beat. It was frustrating to see them not interrupt or even attempt to hit the boss while they flew across the screen, destroying me. I did try a few times to switch often between the other characters, and this did actually help significantly, but as I said, I just wanted to be my character. And secondly, there are a few completely BS attacks that I feel no mere mortal could ever hope to react to fast enough. Other than those small gripes, the combat was great and I honestly enjoyed it still, after the 50 hours that I've put into this game. The skill tree is divided up into 4 separate trees: strength, dexterity, charm, and intellect, which every 2 skills selected in each tree increases stats associated with that tree, as well as getting the skills themselves. Now, skill tree might be a bit of an ambitious term, because a lot of what it is stat upgrades or percentage boosts to skills you already acquired, but I like it nonetheless. There are 2 different types of skill points you gain in Rise of Ronin. One are standard skill points, which can be used in any of the trees, and tree-specific skill points that can only be used to unlock specific abilities within their respective trees. I like this system as it was different and sometimes made me go and seek out specific skill points for certain trees, which made me engage in quests I may have not bothered with otherwise, such as patting all the good little kitty cats throughout the world, so I could purchase a skill point from a certain NPC. Some of the skills that are not simply percentage increases are pretty damn awesome. I particularly like the skill that lets you jump up and grapple to enemies, or the one where you can steal their items if they're trying to use them with my grapple hook. Many of the missions are very similar. Go here, kill enemies, or go here and kill enemies with friends. These missions are sometimes disguised as more, but usually that's what it boils down to. But as I said, the combat is so good that it doesn't really matter. There are a few side quests that shake up the formula a bit, like some of the photograph missions, where you are tasked at taking pictures of something. For example, I once had to chase a drunk and get a picture of them to show their wife where they were wasting all their time and money drinking. Most of the main story missions had you infiltrate or fight through a specific area either on your own or with companions of your choice. These missions usually had optional mini-bosses to take down that if killed made the final boss in the area easier. In what way? I'm not sure, but I always made sure to find all of these enemies to make my life just that little bit easier. Honestly, some of these bosses took me like 30 minutes to an hour to beat, which doesn't sound that long, but that's enough time to fail upwards of 20 times. Basically, every mission, bar a few, followed this mission structure to a T, and near the end of my 50 hours was really starting to get dry. But that did not take away from the fun of the combat or the incredible boss battles. Speaking of boss battles though, a lot of the fights you are fighting against friends or companions which you are forced to do in many situations, then immediately after in the next mission they completely forgot or forgive you for your treachery. It's all very strange. A lot of the battles just end with the 2 people walking in opposite directions even though they've just had a big fight. It's kinda bizarre. I'll address this later in the story segment of the video. So let's talk about the open world itself. The map is divided up into 3 very large maps: Yokohama, Odo, and Kyoto, that become available slowly as you go through the story. Each region has a few unique aesthetic design choices, but usually feel fairly similar. The only difference is the cities, where you can usually tell which map you were in if I was to randomly drop you in and ask you which one you were in. Now the map is highly populated with things to do that all have their own icons, but has an interesting system to make it not so overwhelming and Ubisoft-like. When you get to a new segment of the map, there are a few icons in that area, usually a few bandit camp type areas that need to be cleared. Once done, more icons will appear, such as cats, chests, shrines, or criminal scum in the form of fugitives that need to be killed. Every activity you complete in a segment increases your bond level with that region, which grants you bonuses for that region. For example, goods and services cost less with shopkeepers that reside there. Now I'm going to make a comparison here, but please hear me out before you click off the video because I sound insane. Rise of the Ronin has taken the Witcher 3 approach to its open world design, and it really is fun to run from one icon on the map, completing them quickly, and then moving on to another. Now I know you're cringing right now, but let me explain. The Witcher 3 map is littered with things to do, question marks all over the place that are never too far from one another, and each little thing you can do also doesn't take that long, which is what Rise of the Ronin has done. Not with the quality of the side content, because The Witcher 3 is obviously a million times better in this regard, but with the proximity of things to do and how good it feels moving through the map, clearing the icons in a short time, which is rewarding and really feels like you're accomplishing something. On my way to a new mission, I would usually set a course with custom markers and usually complete 3 to 10 side questy activities on my way there, and it felt like I was using my time effectively, and that the game itself wasn't wasting my time either. That is until I realized that Yokohama was only one of 3 maps that I would have to clear with all the same repetitive side activities, and my enthusiasm for clearing the map really dried up then. The only problem is that doing the main quest alone will not keep you up to the level expectations of the other story quests, and you will soon become underleveled, which just makes an already challenging game harder. So whether you want to or not, you will still be doing side content 45 hours into the game. There are some actual side missions with a bit more story and context, but these usually boil down to being similar to the main story missions and the fact that you just clear an area and take on a boss at the end. There are a few exceptions, but that is the majority of it. I think I also just need to make it clear that I do not think this game is even close to being as good as The Witcher 3, or that its map is anywhere near as good, just before I get laughed off YouTube. You can never be too careful around here. I've been misunderstood like this a few times on this crazy website. Getting around the map is, however, easy and an enjoyable experience thanks to the game's yes you can attitude. Can I jump from my glider straight onto my horse? Why yes you can. Can I jump off a cliff on my horse and then open the glider to fly off? Of course. Can I use my grapple hook and the glider in conjunction to get to all kinds of parts of the map? Yes you can. You get the point. In many other games, I feel like they tend to say no to things like this, but I found myself going, oh, I wish the game would let me do such and such a thing. Oh wait, it does work. You can. That's awesome. I was just expecting it to say no, as most games do. Also, I like how easy and quick it is to call and get on my horse. It just kind of happens instantly. It's great. I think I got off track here. Anyways, the point is getting around the world is a breeze. Literally. The only complaint I have is that climbing can be clunky and many things I'd expect to climb up, I can't. In this respect, I felt like they said no more often and it was a little frustrating. All in all, I think this is a pretty standard open world that did a few little things to make it less like a checklist, but ultimately it's the same thing we have seen for the better part of a decade now in respect to open worlds. Okay, so the gear in this game is the more is better type of approach to loot. I personally dislike this system as a principle. Without mentioning a specific game, because I said I wasn't going to compare them, I prefer when there is only one version of a particular weapon and it's in a very specific chest in a specific area. Rise of the Ronin has you acquire many items constantly, meaning you can get upwards of 20 items in the span of 15 minutes. Actually, thinking about that might be a bit of a modest estimate. You are constantly having to go through your inventory to see if your newly acquired katana does +5 damage than the one you are currently using. This becomes less egregious in the later game because you have so many top tier items that you can just sell or dismantle any items that are not in the top tier. Late game, once you have the items that you want to keep using for the rest of the game, I would highly recommend turning on these options in the menu that automatically dismantle or sell items below a selected tier. I tended to switch between these options every hour or so to keep my money and materials up depending on which I was short of in that moment. This took out a lot of my inventory management time, which I am not a huge fan of in most games. The weapons themselves are all very cool and I like the different playstyles you can use depending on which one you have equipped. They all look pretty awesome as well. Each weapon of each type all play the exact same but have different benefits and look to them with extra bonuses for combining set bonuses. I very much appreciate that this game shipped with a transmog system that is honestly much better than most games. In your home area you can do many things, like send your cats out on missions. Yes, you read that right, but the best thing you can do here is redesign the look of your character's gear. You can choose a set or select individual parts to make any outfit you want from any item that you have collected in the game so far. You can also select how you want your weapons to look within each type, despite which weapon you actually have equipped. It's surprising more games don't have this system, honestly. An even simpler idea I am shocked is not in every game is a favorite system, so you can switch back to an older look if you feel that way inclined. I'll be candid here though, there are many outfits that all look very similar that I could probably have done without. I did like the mix of traditional Japanese clothing and armor mixed with the European outfits. I used about 12 different looks throughout my playthrough and they all looked pretty awesome in my opinion. Okay, last up in the gear part of this video is the upgrading, and I left it to last because I really do not like this system. You may find your preferred weapon fairly early in the game, and then every time you level up you'll need to upgrade your weapon to keep up with the increasingly tanky and stronger enemies. There is simply not enough upgrade materials to do this reliably throughout your playthrough, and you usually have to sacrifice either damage or armor in order to upgrade the other. I don't like this. I understand making us make a choice, but it's not one I enjoyed at all. always having multiple items of armor or weapons that are not as strong as they should be, and on that note, upgrading an item never felt impactful in the slightest, which kinda defeats my own point here. But it still felt bad regardless of the impact it had on gameplay. I won multiple fights with only slivers of health left, so in all honesty, maybe these incremental increases probably did make a difference, but it never felt like it. I have heard a few reports of bad performance with this game, but for me, I haven't seen anything bad at all. No game-breaking bugs, no stuttering or huge FPS drops. It honestly ran extremely well for me for my entire playthrough. There is a lot of pop-in going on, but apart from that, that's it. I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that issue. So I've been mostly positive about Rise of the Ronin so far because gameplay-wise, it is a pretty decent game. Here, however, is where my review is going to take a considerable nosedive into an ocean of negativity. Story is a low point for this game. I am not talking about the setting or the history when I talk about story. I cannot judge the accuracy of the history on display as I don't know enough about it to comment. However, the history present is fascinating and I enjoyed seeing how it all went down according to the game. However, the way they have tried to insert our character into this history is where it starts to get messy, and honestly makes little sense. I have so much to say that I'm struggling to decide where to start, which is ironic because the decision system in this game didn't really know what it wanted to do either. This game presents you with the illusion of choice, with a myriad of choices that ultimately have no impact on how the main story goes. Minor characters may die depending on your decisions, but ultimately you cannot change history, which is why I think it's bizarre that they tried to make this a game where you make choices. I have said this with the new Assassin's Creed titles, I don't know why we can't just have linear set stories anymore. Personally, I think they're better. I don't like making decisions in games. In real life, I am generally terrible at making any decisions from simple ones like where shall we eat out, to what freaking country I should live in. So you can imagine when I think the future of Japan is resting on my decision, that I am just awful. I have to admit that I often Google the repercussions of decisions in games as I can't bear to make a decision without knowing the exact outcome. All that is irrelevant, however, as the history of Japan is set and there is nothing you can do. So making it feel like you have a choice when you really don't is a big no-no for me, regardless of my preconceived opinions on choices in games. A big deal in this game is choosing which side to help in a few selected missions, the shogunate or the anti-shogunate. But ultimately, it matters very little, as you can choose to side with one of them, and then in the next mission, you will be forced into fighting against those same people you just fought alongside in the previous mission. As I said earlier, you are often fighting boss battles against your friends or allies. The game forces you to do this as part of the main quests. Most of the time, after you defeat them in combat, they just walk off disgruntled and slightly injured after you brutally stab them through the chest. In the context of everything that is happening, it is very weak storytelling, and is as see-through as your mum's underwear. That's an out-of-place joke if I ever heard one. You can tell that they just had to somehow fit a story into the gameplay that they had set up. It felt like they designed all these boss fights for all the characters, and instead of having you choose a side and then just miss out on some of the boss battles of the people that are your allies, they wanted to include them all, so they just tried to wrap the already thin main plot into it somehow. It was always weird to return to your allies after just fighting against them in some really important battle and then just acting like they forgive you instantly and that they just need your help with the next mission. It made no sense, and I could never get attached to any of the characters or the main story as it was so unbelievable. No one felt real. Not to mention the main plot of trying to find your blade twin, which I had actually forgotten about until now, which shows how little impact it had on me. Mild spoilers until the next section now, so if you want to avoid all the spoilers, skip to the next part. You have a blade twin that you were raised with in a secret group and trained together to be partners. But on your first mission of the game, you must choose which of your twins to sacrifice and which will be your protagonist. Even though you just spent an hour designing both of your characters, you now have to lose one of them, almost instantly. Speaking of which, the character creator is surprisingly deep and adequate. You can quite easily create unique characters, and I liked it a lot as I can be pretty impatient with these things. I initially was going to choose the male protagonist, but after playing with both of them in the first mission, I just thought she looked so much cooler with her white hair, and I ultimately decided I liked her more. So I sacrificed my male blade twin. After this, you learn your blade twin is alive and working against you in most situations. You have to fight them multiple times throughout the main story and pretty hard boss battles, where they get stronger every time with new moves. The boss battles are fine, but story-wise, it's really weak. The story never did enough to show the strong bond the blade twins are meant to have. I have to keep calling them blade twin because neither of them actually have names. During fights, my blade twin constantly goes on about how he is doing it for us and asks us how we are so blind. He just wants them to be together again. but never actually sticks around long enough to have a normal conversation with our protagonist, who they claim to care so much about. One conversation with him would have cleared up the entire misunderstanding. Now you may be saying, yes, but then we wouldn't have a game. And you're right, but that's not the point. Write a story that is compelling and doesn't have these glaring holes in its narrative. Then I'll have nothing to complain about. And that would be sad, wouldn't it? Now, along with the bond system with the regions of the map, you also have character bonds, which has a lot of good ideas but never really capitalizes on them. By the end of the game, there is an overwhelming amount of people you can have bonds with. I think if they had just limited the amount of characters we had bonds with and then delved deeper into the mechanics of it, then it could have been something special. However, it mostly boils down to making stronger bonds unlock side quests with them or makes them a bit stronger when you take them on a mission. It felt very surface level and didn't appear to make any difference to dialogue. Overall, I didn't care for any of the characters or the story as a whole, which is demonstrated clearly by my choice to start skipping the main quest dialogue only 20 hours in, as I just didn't care anymore. The story made no sense, and neither did any of the characters. I did, however, enjoy learning the history in the game, despite the actual story being terrible. One more thing. My character talked about 3 times in the entire story. I'm not sure why they made the choice to have dialogue choices with no voiceover, but occasionally have them talk in cutscenes. It was a little strange. Normally the protagonist is either mute or isn't, not a mix of both. Despite my disappointment with the story, I still feel this game has a lot to offer. I used to be a story first kind of gamer, but as I have tried out other games and genres, I'm starting to see that gameplay can be just as compelling. Luckily, Rise of the Ronin got the gameplay right, as many of the other facets let it down. If you are someone who likes tough combat and are not fussed about story, then I think this game will scratch that itch until the Elden Ring DLC comes out. I would stress that this is not the greatest game ever, and going into it thinking it's more than it is will only ruin what could be a very enjoyable experience. Check out more of my content on screen now. Thanks for watching, Sticks out.